Hi, welcome to History of the World, Week 7. This week we are picking up with the end of World War II in order to examine the transition into the Cold War and the process of decolonization in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Now, this isn't just international politics we're going to be studying. We're also looking at how the global society is coping with the polarizing changes that these two events produce. This is another challenge to Western sovereignty that we witnessed right after World War I. And there's also going to be, again, of course, that change in the players and the situation. So first of all, we need to look at Western Europe. Europe has been split through the middle from negotiations between the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States immediately after World War II. And so, of course, their primary focus initially is sorting out the new governments, the persecution of war criminals at the Nuremberg trials, malnutrition, starvation of the population, not just individuals who are in concentration camps, prisoners of war, but also just simply civilians who were caught in the middle of the crossfire. And this really isn't helped by the struggle between the United States and its allies and the Soviet Union. The Berlin blockade, the building of the Berlin Wall to keep East Berliners or East Germans out from fleeing into the West. So this is a very, very tense situation. So while there is some relief at the end of World War II that it is finally over, there's definitely recognition that there won't be a, say, return to complacency or a return to isolationism as we had immediately after World War I. There's an acknowledgement, recognition that the stakes after World War II, that the international landscape has changed tremendously. So the West is really attempting to hold on to its international stance. But in particular for Europe, it's becoming much more difficult for them to take a leading role with their decreased military and financial assets. The rebuilding efforts that have to occur in Europe after World War II are far larger than was experienced during World War I. So it's really falling to the United States and the USSR as the last remaining superpowers of the West. And so we're really focusing on them and how they're going to be attempting to influence the globe, influence global relationships after the war. And so basically what this is bringing us to are two worlds. So both the readings by Churchill and Joseph Stalin are demonstrating the wedge between the First World and the Second World. The First World is the United States and its immediate allies, Western Europe excluding Spain, Canada, Japan. The allies are taking a leading role in the rehabilitation of Japan, and other countries that are seeking a relationship with the West. The First World is characterized by favoring Western democratic or Republican governments, an emphasis on the capitalist free market economic system. And obviously anything that is not like them, they feel is going to undermine the system. So again, an immediate callback to World War II. Now, the Second World is sort of the mantle that's taken up by the Soviet Union. This is sort of the second option. So the Soviet Union, remember, it's not just Russia. It's not just the new name of Russia, but it's actually Russia, a confederation of East European nations, the Balkans, and some nations in the Middle East, like Armenia, Georgia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. The Second World is really holding on to that historic argument that capitalism only creates a wedge in society and that the adoption of a communist regime is going to promote a more egalitarian understanding within your own society. Russia, and in particular Stalin, are feeling significantly persecuted by the First World War. That the countries, their former allies, Great Britain, France, the United States, those are the countries who spoke out against the Russian Revolution in 1917. And not much between these nations has changed, at least in terms of their relationship with communism. the official stance against communism. But so this was very much in World War II an alliance of convenience. And once you remove that common enemy of the Axis powers, the old prejudices are allowed to rise up again. So both the First World and the Second World tend to view each other with a great deal of suspicion in terms of what are their future plans in terms of dominance. So what exactly is the Cold War? The Cold War is a period of antagonism between the First and Second World War, First and Second Worlds, with some significant breaks. So technically, the Cold War begins. You can probably say it actually begins about 1945, and point out the Berlin blockade is really the first action of the Cold War. And it's going to be lasting until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Now, when I say there are breaks, I mean that the Cold War itself is technically always in existence. But sometimes there are periods in which hostilities are a little bit more immediate, and periods in which there's going to be at least some sort of diplomatic overtures. Not necessarily to make peace, but a recognition that taking hostilities to the battlefield is going to be counterproductive for both sides. So you're actually going to see some diplomatic exchanges between the United States and China, the United States and the Soviet Union and Great Britain and France. There is going to be some relationship there. So they're not totally cutting themselves out of contact. Now, the reason why it's called a Cold War is because obviously the two dominant powers are the United States and the Soviet Union. And while there are satellite wars, or wars in different fields where the United States and the Soviet Union are definitely influencers, it's not considered a hot war because there is no immediate incident between directly the Soviet Union and between the United States. They're all dealing through intermediaries. What complicates the relationship between the First and Second Worlds is that it plays out on the international stage, and both sides are eager to gain allies or potential areas of influence. So Cuba is one of the immediate examples. Now, the Cuban government at this time is actually supported by the United States, who has been maintaining a very strong intervention status in Cuba since the Spanish-Cuban-American War. Remember, after that war, through the Platt Amendment, the United States said, okay, we are going to be acting as a big brother or a protectorate of Cuba. So Cuba didn't actually gain the direct independence that they were going for. So you're looking at military aid. The United States is a major economic partner because they are the biggest importer of Cuban sugar. And there's a lot of resentment against the United States interference by Cuban nationalists. And these are the factions that are against neocolonialism as practiced by the United States throughout the entirety of Latin America. And so these individuals are supporting decolonization and supporting it because the supporters for decolonization play a major supporting role in the Cold War. These are the individual actors or players that the Soviet Union and the United States are going to be interacting through. Because the decolonization period, you're obviously losing the imperial holdings in these nations. And so as the imperial mother countries leave, they do want to try and retain some ties, and you do want to have some relationship with this new independent government. And that's where the Cold War politics comes in.